Welcome to Garden City Church, a place where you can belong before you believe. This week, Scott Aigner joins us from the teaching team and talks to us about beauty and creativity. If you'd like to partner with us here at the channel, there's 3 ways you can do that. You can like and subscribe, you can share this video with a friend, or you can partner with us financially. You can do that through our website or by mailing us a check. We love you guys so much. Let's get into the Word with Scott.
For those of you who may not know me, my name is Scott Aigner, and I'm a member of the teaching team here at Garden City. George has invited me to speak on a series of Christian virtues, specifically about the virtues of creativity and beauty. When we talk about these Christian virtues, really what we're talking about and what we're expanding on are the ideas that Paul has brought up as these virtues that in our lives as Christians we would want to have. A little bit of a background about myself. First of all, I'm an artist and an art educator, and I've been teaching here locally in Puyallup at Pierce College for 11 years. Prior to that, I taught at a bunch of colleges in Illinois and a college in Colorado. My background is in studio arts, in painting and in drawing. I have a bachelor's degree in painting and drawing and 2 master's degrees with painting and drawing and a little bit of emphasis on technology. My wife is also an artist and art educator. She teaches at a high school in Enumclaw. And my 2 daughters are also continuing art in our family through their work in musical theater and the fact that they produce art every day. My hopes are that I can share with you today a few key ideas that may help you think about creativity and beauty a little bit differently. Maybe even change some ideas or preconceived notions that you may have had about these ideas. And of course, if it's boring, you can always give me a bad rating on ratemyprofessors.com or wait until you get your final student-teacher evaluation. There's 3 key points that I really want to cover today. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about the biblical and theological basis for this. Second, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of the difference between looking and seeing. And last, I want to talk a little bit about why we should be creative and how we can engage with creativity and beauty. So first, let's take a look at biblical theology for this. I think it's important for us to know that there is a theological foundation in the Bible for this idea. First of all, to create is actually to do something in the footsteps of God, who we know as the Creator. The very first verse of the Bible details an act of creativity and creation. Genesis 1:1 reads, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And since we were created in the image of God, Genesis tells us that we are created as humanity in His image. And therefore, we might say that we are created to be creators, just like our Lord. Second, God also appreciates the gifts of creativity. And He's demonstrated this multiple times throughout the Bible. In Exodus 35, verse 35, we're told that the Lord has given His people special skills as engravers, designers, embroiderers in blue and purple and scarlet thread of fine linen. They excel as craftsmen and designers. So He's demonstrating that He appreciates the gift of His people having this skill of creativity. There are also multiple places in the Bible that refer to God in artistic terms. Isaiah 64, verse 8 says, "Yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay, and you are the potter. We are all the work of your hand." Here again, we see humanity framed as a work of art, created by an artist, the potter, and intended to glorify Him. Last, in 1 Kings 7, we see a similar situation play out as Solomon is building the temple. Verses 13 and 14 tell us, "King Solomon sent to Tyre and brought Hiram, whose mother was a widow from the tribe of Naphtali, and whose father was from Tyre, and a skilled craftsman in bronze. Hiram was filled with wisdom, with intelligence, with knowledge to do all kinds of bronze work. And he came to Solomon and did all of the work asked of him." So, now knowing that God is no stranger to creative practices and has shaped and encouraged us to participate in creativity, what comes next? Let's frame this in the context of a few of the things that I tell my students in my beginning art appreciation and beginning drawing classes. I do this by explaining the concept to them of the difference between looking and seeing. The first thing I do is a little experiment, so do this experiment with me. I'm going to say a word, and what I want you to do is just pause for a moment and think about that word. When I say that word, I'm not going to say anything else. Just pause and we'll see what happens. Ready? The word is chair. So what happened when I said that word chair? I think in all likelihood, the first thing that happened to you is you pictured an image of a chair. But what's the likelihood that every single one of us pictured the same exact chair? Pretty small percentage, right? The reason I use this to demonstrate this difference between looking and seeing to my students is that when we're drawing, we are trying to draw observationally. We're trying to learn to draw through the act of drawing what we see in front of us. And in order to do that, we have to start to pay attention to this concept of seeing versus this concept of looking, so that we draw this specific chair rather than our imagined version of a chair. Another example of this. Imagine that you're walking down the street with a friend. You're about ready to step off of the sidewalk into the street, and all of a sudden you see a car coming real close. Your friend is about to step off. What do you say to them? You're going to say, "Look out!" Right? You're not going to say, "Hold on a second. Let's see that car. Let's really pay attention to that. What make? What model? What color was that vehicle? Who was driving that? What was the license plate number?" That's going to take far too long. We're going to end up in a dangerous situation where your friend gets hurt. So we say, "Look." I describe look as a passive act and seeing as an active act. Dom Postema, a theologian and pastor, wrote the following in his book, Space for God. Some artists reveal a deep insight into reality, a capacity to see beneath the surface of nature and people, an awareness that uncovers for us a spiritual vitality in our world and in ourselves, and points us towards God. What has struck me is that a truly contemplative and prayerful person seems to have a similar capacity for seeing deeply into reality, the ability to pay attention to what is beneath the surface, and a willingness to concentrate long enough to catch a vision. So here in this quote, what he's doing is he's making this comparison between what artists do, this act of looking deeply, and what a prayerful person is capable of doing, seeing the world around them in a slightly different way. All of this in the act of glorifying God. Next thing is to understand that creativity is for everyone. Creativity is not limited to artists. It shapes the meaning and the benefit of every activity that we do. There's an author named Robert Pirsig, and he wrote a book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. And in this book, he uses motorcycle maintenance as a metaphor for life, illustrating how even technical tasks require creativity. He argues that a mechanic solving a mechanical problem with care and ingenuity is as much an artist as a painter creating a masterpiece. The difference lies not in the type of work, but in the engagement of mind and in pursuing excellence. That there's something special about the very act of doing any activity, that care, that precision that makes somebody creative. Creativity arises when people deeply care about what they're doing. Whether designing a machine, teaching a class, or building a relationship, it's that care that makes it creative and special. All humans are drawn to beauty. We engage with it for our own sake, unlike other creatures. And we'll touch on that in just a moment here. When I have students come into my drawing class, oftentimes, and some of you are probably thinking the same thing, you may have even said this same thing, when I explain to people that I'm an art professor and that's what I do for a living, the number one thing that I hear people say is, "I can only draw stick people." And I find that interesting because there's an explanation for this, and that's what I tell my students. First of all, I think it's important for us to understand that we've all drawn at some point in our life. Think back to when you were drawing as a little kid. We all know those little drawings of houses, right? It's that little house with that triangle rooftop. Maybe it's got a door, maybe it's got a window, maybe if you're really fancy, it's got a chimney and some smoke coming out of it, right? Or that apple tree. We draw it as a tree, and we all know what the top of that tree looks like. Maybe if we're fancy, it's got a few apples on it. And those suns that we all drew as children, right? That circle with the rays coming off of it. And if we were really cool, our sun had sunglasses, right? So we all knew how to do this, and yet something has happened in those steps between then and now. And this can be explained. This can be explained through two pieces. We'll touch on those two pieces in just a moment. The third thing is that creativity shows us empathy. Creativity is reliant upon empathy and imagination. Empathy requires imagination, seeing from another person's perspective, reflecting God's creative love. I have a quote from Roger Ebert, famed film critic. He said, "For me, the movies are like a machine that generates empathy. If it's a great movie, it lets you understand a little bit more about what it's like to be a different gender, a different race, a different age, a different economic class, a different nationality, a different profession, with different hopes and different dreams and different aspirations and different fears. It helps us to identify with people who are sharing this journey with us. And to me, that is the most noble thing that a good movie can do. And it's the reason to encourage them and to support them and to go see them." And so what Roger Ebert is telling us here is that one of the benefits of creativity is that we can learn more about the world around us. Among the ways that we can learn of how creativity and empathy are tied together, we can also think about the act of incarnation. When we say incarnation, what we're talking about is God becoming human through his son, Jesus, and leading a life on earth. This can be understood, and one of the most helpful ways to help me understand this is by thinking about this as the supreme act of creative imagination. Just as empathy requires imagining life from another person's point of view, incarnation demonstrates that through God's willingness, he entered into the human experience through the incarnation of Christ. We have to remember that Jesus lived, he suffered, he died as one of us, fully understanding the human condition, the joys, the pains, the beauty, and the suffering, all to bring about reconciliation. I believe that one of the greatest benefits of empathy comes through examining the creativity of others. It allows us to have a better understanding of our world. It allows us to step outside of our personal bubbles, which are oftentimes quite small and quite limited, to experience a world of lived experience outside of our own. To me, this aspect of empathy reflects exactly the love Jesus had for the world and for the differences of the people around him. So if creativity is for everyone, how do we engage with creativity and beauty? There's a simple practice, and this simple practice will blow your mind. I'm really going to change your worldview of how we can do things. And that's that every single one of these things requires two things. I tell my students the same thing. The first thing that it requires is education. Now, education can come in a variety of different forms. We don't necessarily mean sitting in a classroom. We can get education through reading books, through watching videos on YouTube, through watching other individuals perform that act. And then it requires the second thing. And the second thing is practice. We don't yet live in the matrix where we can just plug ourselves in and say, hey, I want to know how to do this, and then all of a sudden we know how to do it. We have to have the learning experience, and we have to put that learning experience into practice. The Bible reflects this concept as well. In 1 Timothy 4, verses 14 through 15, he says, "Do not neglect the gift you have, which was given to you by prophecy when the council of elders laid their hands on you. Practice these things, immerse yourself in them, so that all may see your progress." Paul tells Timothy that a gift can be neglected if it's not utilized. So what good is the gift of creativity if it cannot be shared? The concept in these verses is that this gift must be practiced, and that the person must immerse themselves fully in order to give that use of them. And if they do, all may see our progress. We may glorify God, who again is the giver of all of these gifts of creativity. Russ Ramsey, in a book that he wrote called Rembrandt is in the Wind, Learning to Love Art Through the Eyes of Faith, which is an excellent book. Feel free to look that up if you're wanting to know a little bit more. He says, the more that we engage with beauty, the more we train our hearts to anticipate finding beauty, until eventually, everywhere we go, we're looking for it. He says, not only are we drawn to beauty, we are the only creatures who engage with beauty, certain behaviors, purely for the act of encountering beauty. We use vacation days to drive to places where we can see the sun come up over the ocean. We visit art museums, theaters, symphonies. We look at the moon. We look at the stars. We climb to high mountains to put our feet in the frigid waters and to feel the rush and to reflect on the summit in the ripples that we have made. No other creature stops to behold something beautiful for no other reason than it has stirred something in their souls. One of the things that I think is hopeful to remember is that act of creation. What did God do on the seventh day? He rested, right? Now, he didn't rest because he was exhausted. We know that God doesn't get exhausted. He didn't say, oh man, I just spent all this time and energy making things. I need to take a break. He rested so that he could observe his creation. He could look at what he had made and see the beauty in it. So next, what we want to do is we want to take a look at the work and thoughts of three artists to hear their connections to these ideas. The first artist that we'll take a look at is Vincent van Gogh. You've probably heard of Vincent van Gogh before. You've probably seen this painting, really famous painting, Starry Night. And Vincent van Gogh said, "There is nothing more truly artistic than to love people." I think it's really interesting that Vincent van Gogh, an individual who we know had lots of troubles in his life, struggled with a lot of things, had a lot of things that he was grappling with psychologically as he was creating these works, even he was capable of saying, there's nothing more truly artistic than to love people. And I find it extremely interesting that this is the primary teaching of Jesus Christ. Next up, we've got the work of Pablo Picasso. Again, a name you're probably familiar with. You've probably seen his work before. And Pablo Picasso says to us, art washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life. What happens when we place an object up on a shelf and let it sit there? It accumulates with dust. It's left unused. And Pablo Picasso tells us that one of those qualities that art can do is allow us to stand up and shake off that dust, shake that off from our souls and see the world in a new way. And last, we've got the work of Monet, his water lily paintings. Later in Monet's life, he spent a great deal of time at this pond looking at these water lilies and painting them obsessively over and over and over again, even as his vision was failing him. And Matthew 6:28 tells us to consider the lilies of the field. Consider how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. So in conclusion, creativity and beauty are not to be thought of as optional virtues, in that some people have it and some people don't. But they're actually divine callings that lead us to glorify God, to deepen empathy, and to help us to live fully. Engaging with them trains us to see God's handiwork in everything around us. So let us practice creativity as an act of worship, as an act of love, and as an act of transformation. In order to help us do this throughout your week, I've got two activities that I'd like you to consider doing. First, draw a picture of something. Not a doodle, not a cartoon, but something that you will take the time to closely observe, to shift yourself from looking into seeing. Translate the information that you're seeing onto that page. Find any spot to sit and observe the world in front of you and make sure that you are seeing that information and putting that down in your drawing. Second option, write a poem. No structure needed. You don't have to know anything special about poetry. Write a poem in which you describe the beauty that you see and hear in the world around you as you sit quietly for 5 minutes to observe. Take a moment out of your busy, hectic schedules in which you're just going to sit and you're just going to look and you're just going to listen and record that information. Let us strive to see something deeper. Let us strive in our lives to move from looking into seeing. Thank you very much.
you are strong.